Hello everybody and welcome back to another tier list video. It's double upload day. If you haven't checked out part 2 for the first base tier list, go back and check out part 2 and then come back and watch part 3 because this is part 3. And you gotta watch part 2 before you watch part 3. Again, double upload day, the second video of the day today, and we're gonna be covering these 11 players, starting with Josh Naylor, ending with Jared Walsh. Let's get right into it, and let's start with Josh Naylor, the Cleveland Guardians first baseman. Split time with Owen Miller a lot this season at first base. Miller played a lot earlier in the season when Naylor was hurt, and now Naylor's back, so he's kind of been the first baseman lately, so that's why I put him on the list. He's been okay in his career. This year, been pretty good. In the past, all over the place. Additionally, this is the first year that he's been a full-time first baseman. He's done a lot of corner outfield playing in his time with the Padres and his early time with the Guardians. So I'm going to be putting him in C tier. He plays a really good defensive first base, doesn't in the outfield. He's very slow, doesn't track the ball well. But at first base, he plays really good defense. And this year, he's hitting very well to go along with it. Next, we have Matt Olson, who was traded from the Oakland A's to the Atlanta Braves this past offseason. The Braves needed a first baseman to replace Freddie Freeman, who went to the Dodgers, so they got Matt Olson. Olson, in the past, very great hitter, mashes the baseball, has a great eye, takes a lot of walks, and doesn't strike out much. He strikes out a little bit too much, but either way, Olson mashes baseballs. This year, he's played a little bit below expectation, but still been very, very good. That just kind of happens when you change teams, is that you don't quite play up to how you're expected to play. It just happens that way. Where would I rank him? He's definitely going into S tier. He is a phenomenal first baseman. You definitely can put him up here with all of these guys in terms of his overall hitting abilities. He just mashes the baseball. The defense isn't terrible. It's not great. It used to be great. Early in his career, won 2 Gold Glove awards, and he just hasn't reached that level since those Gold Gloves. I don't know what happened. The defense really dropped off, but he's definitely up here in S tier now, even with the only average defense. His bat is still great, and expect him to even get better once he settles in with Atlanta. Next, we have first baseman for the Cubs, Alfonso Rivas. Rivas hasn't been the first baseman all year, started the year with Frank Schwindel at first base. But they transitioned to Rivas at first after Schwindel had some injuries, and Schwindel also has played a lot of DH as well. So Rivas has gotten the majority of the starts, and he hasn't been great. He's honestly played like an F tier player so far this season. I'm not going to be putting him in F tier because this is his rookie season, and I don't think it's fair to put rookies in F tier who have barely seen any major league pitching thus far in their career. So I am going to be putting him into the D tier. Like I said, can't put him in F yet, but he hasn't done good offensively, hasn't done good defensively. Overall, he's probably to this point the worst player on this entire tier list. Next, we have New York Yankees first baseman Anthony Rizzo. Prior to this season, Yankees fans wanted Freddie Freeman to be their first baseman, but they brought Rizzo back instead, and Yankees fans were a little bit upset. But I think if you ask them now, they would not tell you that they're upset with the decision by the Yankees to bring back Rizzo. He's been phenomenal in his return to the Yankees. Played the beginning of his career with the Cubs, and he was a perennial all-star in his time with the Cubs. Towards the end of his tenure with the Cubs, though, kind of dropped off offensively, which is why I think Yankees fans were a little bit upset when they brought back Rizzo, because they were seeing him kind of go on the decline. But he's back to his old form, and he has been incredible. Defensively, he's taken a big hit. He used to be an all-class defender, one of the best defenders in all of baseball at any position. He even won a Platinum Glove Award with the Cubs one year. But suddenly, since going to the Yankees, his defense has been atrocious. He's been absolutely terrible defensively, so I can't put him in the S tier because his defense has been that bad. His offense has been so good this season, though, that I will be putting him into the A tier. I can't drop him down to B tier. He is not on the same level as these guys. And I think, honestly, he fits really well with all the people here in A tier. This is a really good spot for Anthony Rizzo. Next, we have Darren Ruff, who was the DH for the Giants to begin the year. He's kind of moved around between DH, left field, and first base, but he has played mostly first base because of the injury to Brandon Belt. So where would I put Ruff on this list? Ruff has had a very confusing career. Began his career with the Phillies, had maybe a year or two where he was the full-time first baseman there, but he was never successful. He ended up going to Korea and playing there for about 4 years, fixed his swing, learned how to hit a breaking ball, came back to the States, and he's been with the Giants for the last 3 seasons. His first 2 years with the Giants, he was mostly a bench player who faced left-handed pitching, and it was a great role for him. He mashed at the plate, and he didn't have to play defense too much, which is great because he's not a good defender anywhere you put him. In his time with the Giants this season, though, he's been mostly used as a full-time player against both righties and lefties, and hasn't really panned out for him. He doesn't hit righties very well. He mashes against lefties, but against the righties, he can't really do it. And in the full-time play, he just hasn't been great this season. I think we're truly finally being able to see the true colors of Darren Ruff and his skill set. So, with that being said, I'm going to be putting him in the C tier. I don't think he's below average. I think also when you look at his expected numbers, he's supposed to be a little bit better this season than how he's playing. His expected numbers are saying that he's maybe getting a little bit unlucky this year. Additionally, I can't really put him any higher than this because of the poor defensive play, like I said. But I think C tier is very fair. I don't think D tier would make sense for Darren Ruff, especially with the last 2 years playing as well as he had. And it's not really his fault that the Giants are using him in a role that doesn't really suit him that well this season. All right, next we have our second Mariners first baseman on the list. And yeah, that's right. I have 2 Mariners on here because I have Ty France and I have Carlos Santana. So Santana, to begin the year, was actually on the Kansas City Royals. And the reason why I have him on here is because he just recently got traded to the Mariners literally 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I don't have any Royals first baseman on here because they haven't really selected one person to take over for Santana at first base. With that being said, where would I rate him? Well, since he's gone to the Mariners in the last 2 or 3 weeks, he's been absolutely phenomenal, which is good for him. But before that, on the Royals, he was absolutely terrible. I think the change of scenery really helped Santana. But also when you look at the expected numbers, he's been getting really unlucky for the past 3 seasons. Because his last year on the Indians, he was bad. His first year on the Royals, he was bad. And then to begin this season on the Royals, he was bad. But when you look at the expected numbers from all those years, the expected numbers show that he's been getting really unlucky and that he's actually supposed to be having good seasons offensively. Additionally, the defense has always been solid at first base for Santana. He was never a good defensive catcher, but he's always been a good defensive first baseman. So where do I rank him on here? I don't think we can get too excited about expected statistics. After all, you do have to perform on the field in order to really be considered a great player. So I can't put him into B tier or anything because we're really going off of expected stats to even put him in the C tier. If we're going off of real life stats in the past 2 or 3 seasons, he's probably a D tier realistically because his only success has really been in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And when you consider the fact that this ranking is supposed to be based on the past 2+ seasons, considering only 2 weeks isn't really fair. But I am going to be putting him in C tier just because, like I said, the expected statistics are really in Carlos Santana's favor. Additionally, the defense, I really like that, so that helps him as well to keep him out of the D tier. This might be a bit of a hot take in most people's eyes, but I do think Carlos Santana is a C tier. Even in his old age, I think he can still hold up against a lot of the other younger players. Next, we have Rowdy Tellez, the Brewers' first baseman. Tellez began his career as the Blue Jays, DH/first baseman, kind of moved around to multiple positions between first and DH. He had some inconsistent years in Toronto, and the inconsistency wasn't really good in Toronto's eyes, so they traded him to the Milwaukee Brewers. And he went from an inconsistent player to a rather consistent player, at least at the plate. And he's been very good for the Brewers. He's been one of their best hitters in the last season and a half or so. Defensively, he needs to be a DH. He's a terrible defender. Additionally, he's one of the slowest players in all of Major League Baseball. He does not look comfortable out there at first base on the field. He's definitely a liability out there. He's very similar to that of Nathaniel Lowe, where it's clearly obvious that he's not a very good first baseman and that he should probably be DHing. But the hitting is very solid. Now, where do I rank him on the list? He's kind of hard to rate because, like, the hitting's been good but not great, and then the defense has been pretty bad. I'm going to put him in C tier. The inconsistent play in Toronto also kind of brings his overall value down and makes me not put him in B tier. So it is unfortunate to say, but I do think when you consider all the great first basemen that we have in Major League Baseball and you compare him against those first basemen, it's really hard to put him into B tier. So for now, he goes in C. Next, we have the rookie Spencer Torkelson, and man, has he had a rough go of it so far in his rookie season. He's been horrible at the plate, which is totally unexpected. We all thought he was going to be great. I don't know why. You know, rookies tend to struggle when they first get called up. He's similar to Rivas, where I'm not going to be putting him in F tier because it is his rookie season, but I am going to put him in D tier. The offense has been so atrocious that there's no way I can put him even higher than that, even though he has played solid defense at first base. But the hitting's been so bad that he has to be in D tier. And like I said, the rookie season thing, I'm not going to put him in F, but D tier is very, makes sense to me. Makes sense. All right, next we have Joey Votto, the Reds first baseman. If you know anything about Joey Votto, you'll know that this guy is kind of on a Hall of Fame trajectory. The first 10 years of his career, he was one of the best overall players in the entire league. You couldn't keep the guy off base. He hit I think he has had a few seasons of on-base percentages over 450 across the entire season, which is incredible. But recently, the last few years, he's slowed down. He is pretty old. I believe he's 38, so it makes sense. Kind of decline as you get older. Last year was actually a really good year, but the 2 years before that were bad, and this year's been a bad year as well. When you put it all together, I think if he didn't have the good season last year, I would honestly put him in D tier. But because he did have that one good year last year, I'm going to put him in C tier because that at least shows that he has the potential. He has the potential to still climb out of that gutter and be a good player again. But for right now, C tier is where he's going to land. And honestly, I do see the potential for D tier within a year or so. Next, we have Christian Walker of the Arizona Diamondbacks. So Walker began his career as an Oriole, and then he bounced from organization to organization across the waiver wire because he just wasn't very good for a long time. The Diamondbacks eventually gave him a chance as their everyday first baseman once Paul Goldschmidt was traded to the Cardinals, and Walker took it and he ran with it. He's been a pretty solid player for the last 4 seasons or so. Now, last year was a pretty bad year, I will say that. But this year and the 2 years before last year, 2019 and 2020, had really good seasons. And this year in particular is very promising. If you look at his StatCast numbers, tons of red circles on his Baseball Savant page. It looks really nice. He hits the ball really hard. He takes his walks. He doesn't strike out much. It's all something that's very encouraging to see in a player. So I'm kind of disregarding last year, just kind of throwing that out the window because everything else is pointing to him being a really good player. So with that being said, he will go into B tier. Additionally, he's one of the best defensive first basemen in all of the league. He might honestly be number 1 out of all the guys on this list. He's really good defensively. All right, last we are ending it off with Jared Walsh of the Los Angeles Angels. Thank you all for watching the video. Feel free to like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe down below so that you don't miss any future uploads, including all of our tier lists, and maybe some more surprise content coming in the future, so stay tuned for that. But let's talk about Walsh. So, Walsh, last year I believe was his first year as the full-time starter at first base for the Angels, and he had a rather good season. He may have even been an all-star if I'm remembering correctly. But this year has been not very good. It hasn't been terrible, but it hasn't been very good either. I'd put it as a below-average season. He plays average average defense, and the offense is kind of below average for the season. Like I said, though, last year was a good offensive season, and I wasn't really sure how to rate him, so I decided to look at the expected statistics from both this year and last year. Turns out this year he's getting a little bit unlucky when you look at the expected stats. He should be playing a little bit better, but he's just getting unlucky. And last year, while he had good stats, he actually got a little bit lucky last year. He should have been a little bit worse than he was actually playing. So I think when you put that all together, it makes for a relatively average hitter all around. Combined with the average defense, means he's basically average, C tier player. So that's going to be it for the tier list. Let's go over our top tier guys now. We got Jose Abreu, Freddie Freeman, Paul Goldschmidt, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and Matt Olson, all in the elite of the elite S tier. A tier, we have Pete Alonso, Luis Arraez, Josh Bell, CJ Cron, Ty France, and Anthony Rizzo. Everyone else here is a very solid player. Obviously, no one in F tier, so we can't really rip on anyone too hard there. But thank you all for watching the video. This was really fun. I appreciate those of you who have come and checked out all the tier lists to this point. If you haven't watched the catcher tier list, feel free to go back and watch those. Those are some pretty good videos as well. But yeah, that's going to be it for me. Stay tuned and stay subscribed so that you can see the second base and all the other position tier lists coming at you very, very soon. So thank you again and have a great day. Bye-bye.